So I'm going to go to the iPad. Pick that up. Okay. Now, can you all still see me up in the camera in the corner? Yeah. Yep. Good. Excellent. Because I'll be sort of pointing to my hand at the same time as pointing to what you're seeing on the screen. So just be aware to keep an eye on that. So if we're going to do something in the icon, we've got to first understand it in nature, how it's constructed, what it's made of, what creates the shapes that we see. So I've got a little illustration here of two hands. And if you notice, you can see where the outline of the hand is. And then underneath, this is showing you the skeleton. And this is really, really, really important because those bones really give the distinctive shapes in the hand. If you just try and copy what you see on the outside without understanding what's making it, you can make life really, really difficult for yourself. Whereas with a little bit of understanding of what's inside, you'll understand what is just maybe giving just a slight distinctive shape, but it really is a key shape. So if you take your hand and with the other hand, I want you just to feel it, okay? And just feel those knuckles. And you see how just really bony they are and how big they are when you actually feel it. And then beneath it, you can feel those bones going down here and what ridges they form. And then likewise on the finger, you can feel that sort of pad part underneath, but on the top part, it's really, really hard. So you've got a flabby bit, which is made of muscle, and then you've got just skin really pulled over a bone. So that's making a different impact. The bone is much closer to the surface here, so it's a much sharper surface. But underneath, you've got all that padding, which is making it round. And if you see, when there's crunch up my hands, you see how those pads at the bottom are becoming really rounded. So you've got this sort of rounded side and then a flatter side. And that's because of the relationship of the bones to the skin. Now, if you look on the screen, you can see that a radial effect in the hand. So it's almost like from this spot here, it's radiating out like that. Okay. So it's creating a pattern in the hand, an order, a rhythm, a unity to the composition. So you've got the wrist here, from which that's all radiating out. And if you notice then, where the knuckles are these really big bones. And those really mark the big transition from the palm, the base of the hands, to then where the digits are going to spring from. Now, that radial effect, you can also see in the size of those bones. You see how the bones in the main part of the hand are longer than the first section of the finger, which in turn is just a little bit longer than the next section of bone, and which itself is a bit longer than the final bit of bone. So you see how you've got those sections, and they're going from longer to smaller. It's a very graceful transition. It's got a real rhythm to it. Now, also notice that the knuckles are on a curve. You see that? And that's echoed by the knuckles here. And then by the joints there. And then by the length of the finger there. So it's gradually getting shorter and shorter and shorter, both in terms of the actual length of the bones, one after the other, but then also in terms of what's in the middle and then what's on the outside. So it creates a balanced movement. And if you notice, the thumb is really just a continuation of that knuckle line. So if you're trying to work out how long should your thumb be, find out where the main knuckle is on the finger and bring it across. So we could divide that hand up into 2 squares. Up there. That is a square, which then you've got those knuckles as a slight curve, and then the thumb coming off from that square there, and then the wrist is a smaller square here, from which then the arm is radiating. So you've got your wrist, if you look here, so you've got your wrist, and then you've got your arm coming down here. So you've got that part here. And then you've got a half and a little bit longer than a half. Okay, so a half and a little bit longer than a half of that shape. That's making sense. Are you all with me? More or less? There's some nods going on. Okay. So basically, once you've understood that, that's how we're going to construct the iconographic hand, one lot oblong, which is then going to be broken up into 4 digits. Okay. So I'm going to play you a little video now, which I've made, showing how to draw the hand step by step. Okay, it's very simple, very straightforward. And actually, I hope that by breaking it down like this, it will give you the confidence to be able to try hands in general. So let's go to the little video. So I'm drawing a rectangle. Don't worry about not being able to see it too clearly. That will come back in a little bit. When you begin, sketch things out so lightly you can hardly see. So can you see there? There's the first square and the second square. And there's the thumb. What's going to be the thumb? Okay. And now I've just put in a slight curve on that central line, which is where the knuckles are going to be. Okay. Then I'm putting a center line, because the center line will be to divide between the 2 sets of 2 middle fingers, and then dividing it in half again, and that's giving me the 4 digits. Now this is going to be the palm. So at this point, just back here, if you've got it like that, that could be the front of the hand or the back of the hand. So whichever way you're drawing the hand, you start the same. An oblong divided into 2 squares. Then you put your thumb on at that point, but if it's going to be in the front of your hand, then you're going to see we've got to put that padded area in. Okay. So here we go. Notice I'm just doing lines, not trying to make it anything more than that. Now at the bottom here, at the top, sorry, at the top there, can you see instead of doing a line straight, I've moved it to a slight angle. And that's because if I have a hand like that, which is flat, it's actually not very elegant. And often in the icon, you'll find that that first finger, the index finger, will be slightly open like that, okay? I'm putting in that curved line and I'm putting in the knuckle lines now. Those curved lines. Now, notice that where the little finger is going to be, it's much lower than where it's going to be on the index finger. So just be a note that it's not the same at both sides. If you look at my hand here, you can see that the first knuckle, you see my little finger is really a lot lower than my index finger. So it sort of goes up and then down. Okay, so get that curve going that way. So now I've moved to a darker pencil. So I've moved to probably a 4B pencil at this point, so I can do darker lines but easily remove them. And the first layer that I did there was just very, very lightly applied, and you could use a 2H for that, for example. Don't press hard, but just lightly doing it with a 2H, because then your construction lines are easily erased and you're left then with a very clean final drawing. Now, can you see what I've done here? First of all, I'm inclined that line away from the edge of the square to give that slight gap. And now I've put the other side of the finger in a way that it's getting thinner and thinner. So it starts they're all going to start at the same width, and then it gets narrower and narrower and narrower in 3 sections, basically. So from the one knuckle to the next knuckle, then to the next knuckle, and then to the end, it's gradually coming together, it's converging, and then with a sort of rounded end. Okay. So now I'm going to do the next one. Now, can you see how I've taken the line slightly in from the straight? So it's creating more of a gap between those 2 fingers. And also because I'm going to have to taper every finger. And if they're all going to be tapered, they will all gradually come closer and closer together. So rather than if I didn't move that finger down a little bit, I'd end up with this lower finger coming really quite up. So this makes it a bit easier. So here it comes. Now don't make the fingers too thin. One of the problems I've seen in a lot of people's icons is that the fingers tend to be very spindly, almost like matchsticks. And that's especially true when you come to paint them, because the highlighted area, if you've drawn them too thin, then the highlighted area becomes very, very thin. So when you're doing your initial drawing, make sure they don't get too spindly. Now I'm coming to the thumb. Now you can see me there taking that curve down from the first joint on the index finger to give me the length of the thumb. But just look before there, you see how I've put from that line going across and creating the link between the thumb and the palm. And that has to be quite chunky. If you make that too thin, it'll look as though it will snap off. So this bit here should be reasonably chunky. Now I'm going to put that bulbous bit on the end. And see, there's like that S shape coming down onto the palm. Now, let me just... So can you see here, this finger, the index finger, nicely tapers. But if I compare it to these two, these look really chunky. So you've got chunky chips in the middle, like big sausages, and then you've got a little frite on the side, if you want to use a sort of chip analogy. So what we want is we want them all to be related to each other. We don't want one spindly one and one really thick one. What we want is 4 fingers that belong to the same hand. And as you see, I begin to work on these, you'll see I begin to refine those down. And that's important because in the icon, we want to have anatomical accuracy, but we also want to have elegance. Visual elegance speaks about spiritual elegance. A beautiful calligraphic shaped hand will communicate spiritual elegance. If you make a clunky hand, you might have a beautiful face and even a good posture, but if your hand is clunky and sausage-like, it will really dampen down the power and the spiritual resonance of your icon. So this is the sort of thing to look for. Once you've got the proportions right, then we're beginning to create movement and elegance within the design. So I'm working on the tip of that one to make it a little bit more chunky. That one I'm taking down because it's too chunky. So you see here, I've cut it down. Did you see that? So you can see the lighter line there, which is where it was. But this time I've cut in, and you see I've got at an angle to there, stopped, made the next line, stopped, and then taking it along and round the tip, making a substance to the tip. I'll give you a demonstration on fingers as well in a little bit, but just to see here how I've taken that chunky chip of a finger and begun to refine it down. I'm doing the same on the other side. You see how I just cut that in. Now I've got to bring this in to match it. And that one there. So I just made that one slightly shorter, that one slightly bigger. Make sure it joins the base of the hand. Now here, can you see how this line between the middle 2 fingers? That is classic for the design of the inside of the hand. You usually have a good strong line across just between the 2 fingers. Now I'm trying to just refining the sort of S shape of that finger there. Now, one of the key things to have is a putty rubber. That's what I was using just then. That's a really soft, pliable rubber because you can shape it and use it just to lift off some of the drawing you've done rather than a heavy rubber where you end up, churning the paper up. So I do recommend a putty rubber if you want to get one. Now, the problem with the end of that finger, if I go back, was, you can see one I had to lengthen it, and also it's sort of got a bit pointy at the end. One of the problems with doing nails on the end of doing the end of the finger, you don't want a sharp point. I'll come back again to this later. You want this rounded end. It's a much gentler, less aggressive way of doing a finger. So I'm using a putty rubber just to take that back and giving me the freedom to then make that a little wider to match the other fingers and create a nice rounded end to the finger. So that's much, much softer and more pleasing. So what I'm trying to do here is to, now having created the structure of the hand, I'm now trying to draw out the elegance of the hand. So it's got to be anatomically correct. So fingers in proportion to the rest of the hand and so forth. But we need elegance. And this is, I think, the biggest weakness in most amateur iconographers, is when it comes to hands, they get it to a certain point, but then they don't manage to capture that elegance, and that becomes really important in composition. We'll look at this later in the next couple of weeks about how that works within the icon. But unless you can create real flow within the hand, it will spoil your icon. So this bit is really important. You see how I'm refining those ends so that they relate to each other, they've got the same rhythm and size, and that takes a little bit of tweaking. Now, you notice here I've made that little finger now a little thicker because it was just a bit too thin in compared to the others. And I'm reducing the size of the ring finger. And now reducing the size of the middle finger. So you see how I've sort of just tweaked the width there so that it's got real balance. Bringing out the cushion on the thumb so it's a nice rounded shape there. Now with the thumb, let me just, can you see that shape? You see the edge there? I've sort of just knocked that back a little bit. So initially it was like that, it was that rounded shape, but that's a bit clumsy. Whereas there, just taking a little bit of that depth out, suddenly you've got something which is less of a sort of blob and something that's really integrated with the proportions overall. Also, what should I do next on this side of the thumb? I'm going to curve in between that point there and the knuckle, and then slightly adjust the sweep of the middle joint on the thumb. So just pay attention to this. Now you see how that just scooped in and that's scooping down. So you see now how you've got that elegant movement, almost an S shape, from the tip of the thumb over the knuckle and then round the at the end there. Clean that up with your putty rubber. Now, can you see what I've done there? I did that as one sweeping line from here all the way up to the tip and round the edge. Now, on this side, I'm going to make it more into the 3 joints. We need to keep a unity to the finger, but we want to give it distinction. That's what gives it its identity, really. It's not a sausage, it's a finger. So on the inside, as it were, how can I show you that? Like that. Along here, it's like I'm making that smooth, so it's just one long sweep. But then on the back of the finger, I'm going with the 3 joints. So that's going to give it its distinction, and this will give it the unity. So long sweep, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now at the bottom there, I'm just putting an extra shadow in there, because actually if you look on your hand here, where the fingers join the base of the hand, there's a little fold and a little dip in there, which is quite dark. So you need a little shadow, maybe a little teardrop shape just at the bottom between each finger. And that will help give it that palm look. So now attaching it to that wrist, and you've got that elegant hand. At the bottom here, just a little bit of padding connecting to the bottom of the mound of the thumb. Now, I'm going to now do exactly the same thing, but from the other side. So rather than the palm, we're going to show the back of the hand. So following exactly the same process that we've been doing. So first of all, you've got your rectangle divided into 2 equal squares. Curve the ends, curve where the knuckles are going. Divide up into 4 equal widths. Put in the thumb. Getting that index finger slightly separate from the rest of the hand. Putting in those knuckles. The bigger sweep where the little finger is. At this point, you could be doing either the palm or the back of the hand. Working on the index finger, middle finger, bringing it in slightly, tapering the shape. Again, bringing the finger in and tapering, and then with that little finger, not taking it up too far. Thumb. Now, this is where it begins to change, because the thumb is sort of behind the main part of the hand. So it changes it slightly there. So you see how it's sort of resting on the line of the main part of the hand there, just where I'm joining there. It sort of stops. Okay, now change to my 3B, 4B, and getting those 3 segments in. It's getting a nice taper from each segment. That gives it a flow, getting the ends of the fingers rounded. Bringing this one in so it's not too thick. Curving that in. that little finger. I'm going to work on this thumb. I'm going to just bring that out a little bit further. It's a bit too thin. Again, it can make it look as though it's going to snap off if you're not careful. So try and make sure the base of the thumb is solid enough. And don't make the end of the thumb or the fingers into a claw. So you see, I just sort of flicked that out, thickened it up, and now you've got a more or less aggressive composition. Putting in those little shadows again, maybe not quite so strong on the back as on the front. Nice rounded edge. And now I'm going to clean it up. Now in the icon, the hands gesture, a bit like the Italians, you know, it's a means of communication. And often the hand will be pointing to something. Say in a deesis icon, the Virgin Mary and John the Baptist will point to Christ, and it's a way of worshipping Christ, to point to him. Hodrogita, Our Lady who points the way, pointing, presenting Jesus. The hands, very, very important for that. And you can see in here how those are taking you somewhere. They're like arrows which are going across from one side to the other as they narrow and come closer together. As the finger breaks away, it's taking you on a visual journey. Now, I want to now look at an individual finger. Just as we've tried to make the hand overall very elegant and to be expressive, as I've just been explaining, to point the way, so each finger has its own beauty and form. So let's just look at that now. So there's the first segment, second segment, and the third segment. Okay. Now, if you compare this finger to the ones on the hand above, you can see this one is really quite thin in proportion to its length. And this would be a female hand on, for example, like Our Lady of Vladimir, that famous Russian icon. If you look on the hands of Our Lady there, they are very thin and elegant. Definitely a feminine hand. But notice each section, if you build it up section by section, it's getting that distinctive finger shape. Now I'll just put in where the joints are there. And notice as I'm coming down, I'm sort of slightly curving that line. And then if you draw the inside line according to each joint, it will give you that slight form of a finger without drawing it in great big sort of segments. Just draw 1, 2, 3, and it will give you the shape without having to exaggerate it. Now, the other thing to notice here is you see the fingernail. Sorry, let me just move that hand that way. If you watch how I do the fingernail, here it comes. That's it. And notice that the line doesn't join up at either end. A lot of people sort of do fingernails as though they're doing their nail varnish. So you end up with these really strongly defined nails. But if you look at my hand, the color, it is almost invisible when you glance. You have to look up really carefully and then you begin to see it. But from a distance, becomes less and less obvious. Now, most of the icons that we draw are drawn very small, so you're actually presenting them as though from a great distance. So for sure, you shouldn't have a deep, dark line around all the way around the end of the finger, because that will make it as dark as, say, the depth of where the eye socket is. And for sure, the nail isn't sunk right inside the finger. So make sure that it's just a slight line to indicate it, because that's how you see it. Don't make Our Lady smothered in makeup. All right. I don't think Mary wears nail varnish. Maybe in the Orthodox tradition, but not in the Catholic one. So just keep those nails nice and delicate. Okay. Just a few little marks there to indicate those wrinkles at the top of the joints. On an older saint, those are going to be stronger. On a child, they'll be almost non-existent because the skin is much more supple. So now resolving the sides, now the ends. Notice how that's nice and rounded. And if you look at your finger or feel it, it's got that sort of roundedness, that soft cushion. Now this is how not to draw it. Can you see that? Now the reason that's not right is because it's like a claw. Can you see it's just coming straight up to a sharp point, and it's lost that cushion on the end of the finger. So notice it comes down and round, nice and soft. It's not like a sharp point which is going to scratch your eyes out. Okay, we want something gentle. We want something that's soft, like that little pad at the end of your finger. We don't want a nail that's growing out into a sort of claw-like effect. So just watch how you do the end of your fingers. Okay. So there you see how you just curve it in like that at the end. And then just also, you see at the top there, rather than just a straight line, it's actually slightly curving in and coming up. Again, that makes it less aggressive. And actually, if you look at a finger, you can see how actually it goes down a little bit where the cuticle is. And then, as it were, sort of coming up from where that nail grows from under the cuticle up to the end of the finger. So having a slight gradient there helps to show that. So that's the direction of the lines you're doing. Okay, so slightly up, a nice and rounded, soft shape. Okay, everybody. Well, that brings to a conclusion this introduction to drawing hands. As I say, the best thing is to try and draw just simply this, maybe once a day for the next week.